The supplement industry, a lot of people don't know that it is very unregulated as well. When we make these lifestyle changes, there are side effects too, but they're all good.
I have a lot of boundaries and zero fucks.
So if you turn over the bottle or the package and you see fragrance, the best thing you can do is avoid it.
Welcome to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out the raw, unfiltered truths about menopause with a side of sass. Forget what you've heard. This is not your grandma's podcast. We're diving headfirst into the wild ride of menopause, from hot flashes to mood swings and everything in between. I'm your host today, riding solo without my awesome co-host, Courtney. We miss you, but so happy today to introduce a true warrior for women's health and wellness, Andie Jones. She is here to help make healthy happen by offering practical tips and personal stories about how to navigate through clean living. Whether it's finding safer personal care products, tackling hormone disruptors, or just getting through her everyday life as a midlife mom, she's here for us. Andie Jones, with an entrepreneurial spirit and years of experience in clinical practice, Andie has partnered with mission-driven companies to help women make healthy happen. Andie's on a mission to show women how to avoid environmental toxins and hormone disruptors hiding in their food, their personal care, and household products, and instead making clean lifestyle changes that optimize their health. The transition to menopause is a key moment where these swaps can make a huge difference, alleviating symptoms and help women feel vibrant, energetic, and more like themselves. Now, I know personally Andie, and as a mom of two beautiful kiddos, Andie is dedicated to advocating for a safer, toxin-free future for them and for all of us. She believes that aging is a gift and that we can enter this next phase with grace, gratitude, and celebration, feeling more empowered than ever before. So we are about to dive deep into her inspiring journey. I know I certainly have been inspired by Andie and all of your fantastic content on Instagram, and so anxious to hear about what you're doing these days. So welcome. It's such an honor and pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me here. I'm so honored to be here. And I have been inspired by what you're up to as well. And I think this podcast and this conversation is just so important. So thanks for having me.
Well, personally, you're a beautiful human being, and what you're doing for your community is equally as beautiful. Let's dive right in, Andie. Your journey into clean living wasn't just a passion project. This came from a very personal battle that you had with infertility and miscarriages, as so many of us women did. How did discovering all of those hidden toxins in your natural products really light a fire under you? And how has it shaped your mission to fight for a safer, more transparent wellness options?
Yeah, I think so many of us, our personal experiences can really light a fire in the changes that we want to help make in other people's lives and in the world. And, even backing it up a bit, I had been in private practice as a functional nutritionist for years. I have a master's in holistic nutrition, and I'm a certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner. So I was operating in that space and working with clients one-on-one and teaching and mentoring other nutritionists and health professionals. And so I feel like I was walking the walk. I felt like I had done a lot of research. I knew a lot about living a healthy lifestyle. And when it came time to start a family, my husband and I, we had done a lot of preconception stuff to just set us up for success. And then we were struggling with fertility. We were struggling to get pregnant. And when we were pregnant, we were having recurring miscarriages. And that was a really difficult time. And I know so many women experience similar challenges. And at the time, it felt like actually I knew so many women going through similar issues with fertility. And I also, just through my practice, was seeing a lot of cases of young women in their 20s and 30s getting diagnosed with breast cancer and other forms of cancer. And autoimmune diseases just like exploding. And I was just in this place like, what the heck is going on in the world? Like, how is this happening? And for my own fertility journey, was really committed to trying to understand like what was at the root of what was happening that was causing the miscarriages. And through that journey, learned that it was really just mild hormone fluctuations. And one of the things that the fertility doctor I was working with suggested is looking at any endocrine disruptors that I was being exposed to. And even though I was like eating organic and had a healthy lifestyle and was using what I thought were better personal care products, a lot of them were natural or organic. I mean, I was buying things at Whole Foods. To be honest, a lot of them weren't even products that I thought were that great. I just thought they were probably healthier. Well, as soon as I started getting educated on the environmental toxins in our personal care products and turning the bottle over and looking at the ingredients, I was really floored that I just felt like I was being duped, like believing what was on the label, that this would be safer and healthier, and finding out that these products actually had a lot of environmental toxins and endocrine disruptors in them. And it was around that time that I also learned about the lack of regulation in that industry. And at the time, there had not been any major federal regulation governing personal care product ingredients since 1938. And this was over 10 years ago, but it had been a very, very long time. When you think about the fact that a lot of the ingredients that we were using weren't even around in 1938. And I learned that the European Union and a lot of other countries had been regulating on this issue for decades. And for instance, in the European Union at the time, they had like 1,600 ingredients that were not able to be used in personal care products for humans. And in the US, we only had 11 ingredients that were banned. So when I was learning all of this and just knowing my journey and feeling like, gosh, if I don't know this, then I'm sure a lot of the people in my life have not heard about this. And I felt really passionate about educating people and helping to advocate for safer regulations, because I don't think as consumers the onus should all be on us to know all of this. I just really felt like I wanted to use my voice to help educate and help create change in this. And if I could help one other person not have to follow my footsteps in the fertility journey or avoid a cancer diagnosis or whatever it might be, it just felt absolutely worth it.
Mm.
So that's what really lit the fire.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to know Andie for several years through a mutual friend, and I can attest that not only are you so beautiful on the outside, but you're so beautiful on the inside, and your knowledge. And thank you for sharing that vulnerability of what has happened to you and your husband with your fertility struggles, because I do think that a lot of women go through that, including myself, having a miscarriage. And it's a very silent time. You feel very alone. And so just for you to speak out about that and things that helped you throughout that journey, I'm most certain there are going to be women that are benefiting from you sharing your story. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I totally feel that like kind of normalizing the challenges that we all can navigate and talking about it, just shedding light on these things, it just really helps, to know that you're not alone.
Yeah. Given your background and your experience and sort of your personal journey, we're hearing a lot about environmental toxins and hormone imbalances. Like, it is a very, very real thing. What have you found, Andie, throughout your journey to be some easy swaps that women can make today and sort of ditch some of those toxins to keep their hormones happy without feeling really overwhelmed? Because that's my challenge is, you listen to these influencers and you go out, you find yourself in a TikTok rabbit hole and you don't quite know what to believe. So can you share with us some of your knowledge and experience around those hormone disruptors and things that you've done that might benefit other
Yeah,
women?
absolutely. I think that one of the things I really like to focus on is keeping it simple, because the first thing that happens, we get overwhelmed and then we just don't do anything. And a lot of times you hear the saying, if you know better, then you do better. And I think that's partially true, but sometimes we know better, but we're overwhelmed or it's just easier to not change, or there's can be so many factors at play, right? So I really just like to keep it simple. I do think when it comes to endocrine disruptors, there's so many links to hormone health. And the studies have shown that even small amounts of these endocrine disruptors, because hormones are in our body in small amounts, they're like these, it's like a symphony of little, instruments. And even the way that hormones work is in small fluctuations. So when we're exposed to these ingredients, even in small amounts, it does create an impact in our body. And that's actually one of the reasons it creates the impact, is because they are in such small amounts. So sometimes, we can think, oh, it's just a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Maybe it's not a big deal. But it really does have an impact on how our hormones work, how our bodies can, these ingredients slow down our detox pathways. And we need to use these detox pathways to also clear hormones. So it impacts our hormone balance sometimes because we're not able to detox hormones that are endogenous, like our bodies have made. And then a lot of these toxic ingredients are also obesogens. So they affect our body's ability to lose weight, or may cause us to retain weight. So they have a lot of impact on a lot of the struggles that we experience, especially at midlife for women. But in terms of just keeping it simple and easy steps, number one is just look at ingredients. In my nutrition career, I really started out with educating people about, like, same thing with food, right? Turn over the package and look at what you're eating. And generally speaking, fewer ingredients is better. And if you can recognize those ingredients, that's better. Just common sense around those things. And the same thing applies to personal care products. If you can't find an ingredient list, like, that's kind of a red flag. I think it's a little bit more complicated with personal care products because a lot of times they are using, like, the chemical name of things that is harder to understand. But looking for shorter ingredient lists and looking for some big red flag ingredients. With that, I would say fragrance is number one. So if you turn over the bottle or the package and you see fragrance, then the best thing you can do is avoid it and search for something that's a fragrance-free option. I know fragrances can be very, like, appealing, and there's a lot of, emotional connection to fragrances, but we can get a lot of that benefit from essential oils and other things that smell good. There's a fragrance loophole in the regulation. So when something says fragrance, that is made up of probably hundreds of ingredients, and they don't have to disclose what those ingredients are because it's intellectual property. So when they put fragrance on the label, essentially they can say that a product is paraben free or phthalate free, some of these other kind of red flag ingredients, but those ingredients could be in the fragrance. And if you did third party testing and, like, reverse engineered it, even if they did have those, they could say, oh, that was in the fragrance. So it's kind of this loophole with sneaking in ingredients that you might not really want on your body. So fragrance is biggie. The more savvy companies these days are starting to learn that they need to disclose, like, actually, even though the law doesn't require them to, they should actually list out those ingredients. So if you're seeing fragrance, that means they're not disclosing what's in those ingredients. So that's a big one. A lot of the real nasty ingredients that we want to avoid are often in the fragrance. And then the third thing I would say, and this is probably the biggest and easiest, is rely on some of the great third party tools and nonprofits that are out there that can validate and do some of this research for you. So my favorite, which you may have heard about before, is the Environmental Working Group. They're a third-party watchdog. They're the company that comes out with the list every year of the dirty dozen, like the 12 fruits and vegetable produce items that have the highest pesticide content. They also do analysis around personal care products, and they have an app that's free. It's called the Healthy Living app that you can download on your phone, or you can go to their website and type in the name of a product, or in the app, you can scan a barcode. It'll pull up whether that product is rated from 0 being the best to 10 being kind of the worst in terms of ingredient safety. And it's not a perfect tool. You might not be able to find every single product in there, but it helps you narrow down to the things that are kind of the safest products. 0 to 2 is kind of the safest range. And if it's EWG verified, that means that they've given it like their highest stamp of approval in terms of safety. So that's a great resource looking at like EWG verified products. It kind of takes the guesswork out of it for you and makes it easier to know that it's got their stamp of approval.
Oh my gosh. I mean, isn't it so disheartening to know that this is just an absolute business and these people are pulling the wool over our eyes, right? I mean, even
Mhm.
looking at simple icons that we're looking at on products, paraben free, organic, things like that aren't even really meaning anything these days because of these loopholes.
Yeah, the regulation is an issue. And I worked with Beauty Counter for the last decade, and they really paved the way in terms of changing legislation and setting the standard for product safety. And one of the things that I really learned through my work with Beauty Counter is that the lengths that the company had to go to really ensure that the ingredients were clean, it was crazy. The industry is not set up to make it easy for companies to know. For instance, if you're sourcing aloe, does it have a preservative packaged with it already? You would think that would be easy to know, but Beauty Counter would actually have to pay to have third-party testing on the raw ingredients because sometimes the manufacturers didn't even know what other preservatives were in an ingredient that they were selling. I think there definitely are companies out there that don't have good intentions, but there's also just the way that the whole industry is set up makes it really hard for companies to do the right thing.
Oh, that makes me just sick to my stomach. I recently was fortunate enough to be an attendee at a very powerful women's conference of mass tort attorneys who are going up against Roundup and Monsanto and all of those things. And there was discussion amongst this group of people about appeal, apparently, where I believe it's called appeal, where it's a coating that companies are utilizing on apples and pears to increase the shelf life
Mhm.
of these things so they'll stay on a grocery shelf longer, right? Which, of course, increases profitability for that company. But if you look at the ingredients of even some of that outer coating, there's really harmful ingredients in it. So if it's not in our self-care products, it's the coating or produce to essentially make them look more beautiful and last longer on shelves. So I just feel like it's everywhere. And how do we put a
Yeah.
stop to it? But I suppose just, speaking to people like you who are so knowledgeable and putting out such amazing content and resources on your Instagram feed is just a small way that we can do that. So hopefully there's more of that coming. So thank you. Menopause, Hot Flash Health, of course, is all about menopause. And as
Mhm.
many of us know, it's certainly no walk in the park. Do you have any sort of clean living tips or secrets that help women really take control of their health and transition into this beautiful yet disastrous stage of life that we're all experiencing? I know you've been really big on infrared. I know that you've incorporated that into your lifestyle. I know that you're using different supplements. As middle aged women, I feel like all of us need to put together sort of a little black book of resources. What are your
Yeah.
go-to resources as I hate to say a middle-aged woman because that sounds so ridiculous. I mean, by the looks of your
Yeah.
skin, you look
Hey,
incredible.
we've earned it. We've
Tell
earned
us,
that title. Yeah, I
yeah.
think first of all, I will just say that small changes matter when it comes to, I think it can be overwhelming when we think about all of the different ways that we get exposed to things, and so much of it is out of our control. But what I think about is if we control the things we can, then we can worry a little less about the things that we can't, because we can't always control the air we breathe. Or I know I've heard about that appeal too, and some of those things are not even disclosed, or you don't even know if you're buying produce that has that or not. So we have a lot of work to do, but when we can make those small changes in our own homes and with what we put on our body, it does make a difference. There are studies that have shown that, for instance, there was a great study, I think it was from Berkeley, on teenage girls. And when they changed their personal care products and they had their blood work done, changed the personal care products they were using to safer, and had blood work done, I believe it was 3 days later, their biomarkers of these endocrine disrupting toxins were drastically reduced within 3 days. So sometimes, especially when I speak with women who are on the older end, they're like, oh, well, what's the use for me? Like, I've already been using these things for years, the damage is done kind of thought. And that's just not true. We also have seen really great research around like breast cancer genes being turned on and turned off by the personal care product ingredients that we're exposed to. So we have, some control over the matter, and small changes do matter. I think when it comes to some of the experiences that we have in this menopause transition, I know they're not all welcome, but I find that the mindset of resistance and kind of fighting the change and dreading it and, all of that comes with it versus shifting into a place of like acceptance and flow around it, like welcoming and celebrating these changes, even though it's not easy, just makes a big difference. It's like what you resist persists, right? Like, I think just that mindset is so impactful. So that's one thing that I really try to project and talk to people about. I think about, even going through puberty and getting our periods and going through that hormone shift and change. When I think back, and a lot of women our age that I talk to, their experience of that was shameful and it was embarrassing and traumatizing. And we have all this stigma tied up with it. And I think now we can look back and see that as like a beautiful coming of age. And we want our daughters to have such a different experience with it. And so I kind of think about it like that too. Like, what can we look back at ourselves from our 90-year-old standpoint, and what would we tell ourselves about this moment of transition and change? But just to go to the tactical stuff, I think that the biggest thing is like focusing on the non-negotiables. And I know this sounds simplistic, but it's like all the things that we know we should do, but we've maybe cut corners in our lives here or there. It's like now we're at that stage where we can't get away with that anymore, and it just really makes a difference. So like hydration, are you getting enough water and hydration? They say drink half your body weight in ounces. I think that's on the low side. I mean, I try and get like 100 to 120 ounces of water a day, and I need to use electrolytes. Like, it makes a world of difference to me in my hydration if I use electrolytes. Part of that is because the food that we eat is so devoid of mineral content compared to food 100 years ago. So we need to replenish with minerals. I think hydration is key, and electrolytes. I think prioritizing optimal sleep times. And this is one that I can sometimes struggle with because I can be a night owl, but just really focusing on getting 7 hours of quality sleep. And if you're having trouble sleeping or waking up during the night, which a lot of women deal with, there's great tools that you can use with like herbal things and supplements that will help with sleep quality. Strength training is huge. I think building our lean body mass is the best thing we can do to kind of, it's like the best anti-aging, like youth serum that we can give ourselves, is helping build lean body mass. And just to do that, eating balanced, but especially focusing on protein. I think for most of us, focusing on making sure we're getting all the essential amino acids. Leucine is a big one for creating muscle mass, and we tend to lose that over time, especially as our estrogen levels decline. So we're kind of fighting against that. And so making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're getting leucine and all the essential amino acids. I think collagen is really a beneficial thing to add in as well, because it's the most abundant protein in our bodies and makes up our skin and our ligaments and helps joints and all the things. So I think those are some of my like big things that I focus on, and they seem so basic. It's not rocket science. It's like the things that we know we should do. But I think we've been able to get away most of our lives with maybe not doing all of those things well. And it catches up to you at this age, and you're like, oh, I really do need to do those things. And gosh, if I had been doing it all along, I'd probably feel 10 times better right now.
Yeah. And thank you. I think that that's really important. It's like go back to the basics, right? Because we, especially with a society where we're constantly consuming all of the information and content and social media, it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed by, this greatest and latest supplement and this. And, you have an influencer telling you one thing and you have a physician telling you the other thing. And the challenge is there's a lot of misinformation out there that's being spread. And so, especially for busy women
Yeah.
like us, it's nice to sort of just go back to the basics. And P.S., whatever you're doing in your life, if it's as simplistic of all of those things, it's really showing just in the beauty of your skin, and you're aging very gracefully. And kudos to
Well,
you because it's
that's
working
very
for
nice of
you.
you to say. Thank you. I actually feel the best that I felt maybe ever, definitely in a long time. And I do think it is that I've really focused on those basics more than I have. I will say I'm almost at 100 days of no alcohol right now, which
Mm,
when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh, well, was that your like? Are you planning to quit drinking?" I'm like, "No, I'm not planning to be done forever. I don't know, but it's felt really good. Just that one change as well of just like I think I sleep better, I have more energy, so that's probably helping as well. But I think that just focusing on the basics in the health industry, like people love to overcomplicate things, and it just keeps people feeling stuck and confused. And I think that sometimes we just need to go back to the basics, and those things alone can be challenging. It's okay to get help and support and work with someone that can help you with those changes or fine tune those things, because those are the things I think that move the dial more than anything. We
yeah.
can bring in other things that can fine tune here or there, but if you've got those non negotiables dialed in, that'll make the biggest difference.
Yeah. And I love it what you said about sort of embracing this time in our lives. Here at Hot Flash Health, we are trying to do more of that and recognizing that this is also a beautiful awakening and sort of reinvention for ourselves as women. Our purposes are changing. So I know at this age, especially with older children, women are really struggling with their identities and their purpose. And so there's sort of a beautiful transition of creativity, or perhaps what's creating purpose for women outside of being moms, right? I know there's a
Mhm.
lot of shift in careers. Someone that's been in a perhaps corporate career for quite some time is now all of a sudden recognizing that that's maybe not fulfilling to them, and they're searching a greater purpose. I know that in our mid 40s, I've read a number of times that creativity is really at its highest. And I
Mhm.
think it can be a really beautiful time, as much as childhood trauma, and we're now really dealing with some difficult things in life that are presenting themselves now at middle age. I also think it's a really beautiful time that we're setting boundaries. We're starting to prioritize self care. We're sick of the bullshit. We're surrounding ourselves with people who are fulfilling to us versus being people pleasing. There's this sort of all encompassing, like, badassery that's going on
Mhm.
with women at this time. And so I really love that you're leaning into this. And instead of being fearful and uncertain, which, don't get me wrong, it is a very uncertain time, but perhaps if we were to lean into some of the more beautiful things that are transitioning at midlife, it might be easier for all of us. So thank you for being a part of that
I
movement.
agree. It's empowering, I think. And I look around, like looking at you and looking at other friends and women at this stage, like people are just like ripe and juicy and like coming into their beauty and coming into their power. And it does feel like a little bit of a like entering a new phase and a new dimension. And we just don't have any more fucks to give. And we're
Yeah.
reevaluating like what's important to us. And I think there can be a lot of challenging things with all this too, but it's also sort of where the magic happens when you have to kind of get real and when you go through hard transitions and experiences. And so I think the more that we talk about that and share that, the more we'll help lift each other up through this. But when I think about past generations, gosh, like I feel like a lot of women, like our mothers' age, did not have that. And it wasn't something they talked about. And it wasn't something they necessarily celebrated. I think this is a real like turning point for women in just number one, sharing and getting more educated. There's a lot to learn. Like overall, the research and, as I'm sure you know, on menopause and different types of support for women, it's so lacking. And the more we're sharing our experiences and just supporting each other through it, I think the better we're all going to come out on the other side too.
Yeah, totally. It's been really fun to see. I mean, menopause is certainly having its moment right now. I think that finally people are recognizing that maybe it is women that rule the world and we need to take care of women.
Yeah.
There's a lot being done of loud voices and even changes on Capitol Hill and within the healthcare system and things like that, where people are just talking about it more, right? They're feeling safer. There's still a long way to
Mhm.
go because I think that the healthcare system is broken in general. You look at your traditional
Mhm.
OBGYN, and not to their fault, but they weren't trained on dealing with menopause and dealing with hormonal shifts that we're going in at. So I think that you're finding more and more physicians and resources, functional medicine doctors, and things like that are really leaning into helping women optimize their hormones, because I think for a long time we've really settled on just being mediocre within the range. We don't have to do that.
Mhm.
We don't have to settle for that anymore. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said about a woman's intuition, especially at this age. If your body is not
Mhm.
feeling right and you're not feeling like yourself, you need to really continue to advocate for that and to get to the root issue and
Mhm.
stop being dismissed on, oh, you're just middle age and here are some antidepressants, here's some anti-anxiety. Because I feel like for a long time that's what we've settled, and that's complete and total bullshit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And also just the accepting of not feeling great. I think we just, and I know I've done this myself, but you just think like we've just come through these years of having young kids and not sleeping great for a decade or however long and all these things. And so we start to think, oh, I just feel a little tired. I'm just like a little sluggish. Oh, I've just gained a little weight. And I think a lot of times we're settling for that's just the way it is. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so, yeah, I think we just need to expect a little bit more and be okay doing the work to help optimize those things. I
Totally.
think
Yeah,
hopefully there will be more support in the medical community for women to do that. And then, like I said, just even some of these basics are things we can start with that I think sometimes we feel like we're doing them, but it's like, are you really, And even when it comes to these environmental toxins, just taking another look, even if you've done some things to ditch plastics, like that's a great change. Take another look because sometimes these things like creep back into our lives, even if we feel like we've made a change. And once you make one change, kind of then you can move on to the next and keep making those swaps.
totally. You, Andy, were early on in the beauty counter industry, and I know the recent disruption with beauty counter has been really disheartening for you and for your entire community, because you were such a huge ambassador and you were such a believer and still are. You've recently, and I was always so inspired by you as a beauty counter ambassador and just your knowledge and expertise around truly what to look for in beauty products. You've recently just partnered with Shackley as a wellness ambassador, which I can only imagine,
Yes.
knowing you, that shift had to be very mindful in the research and due diligence and all of the things that you're looking for you to put your stamp of approval on it. Tell us a little bit about that journey, that shift, what you found as a wellness ambassador, perhaps some of their products that have been really life changing for you, particularly at this middle aged queenager status
Yes.
that we're living.
Well, I had been partnered with Beauty Counter for the last 10 plus years and really, as so many of us did, played a huge part in the movement that was Beauty Counter. And I'm really proud of all of the work that we did there. And it ended so quickly and suddenly it felt like someone died. Like it was a lot of grief, not only in the business that I had built personally for the last decade, but also just, it was just something like really special that we were a part of. And Hopefully Beauty Counter will be back at some point. But I think that at the end of the day, the work that we were doing mattered. And we did impact a lot of change in the industry. And there's still a lot to do. And there's a lot of educating. There's still laws to shift. And I'm very passionate about that work. But my background is really more in the nutrition and wellness space. And this was like a facet of it that was just a beautiful addition to my life. But overall, I feel very passionate about people living and feeling their best and living well longer and feeling young longer and looking young longer. Like all of those things are really really where my heart is. And when all this change happened, I first and foremost just felt responsible to help my community find other safe, good products that they could use, myself included. Wanted to find things that we just don't have to compromise, like the performance and the effectiveness with the safety. And there is so much greenwashing out there. And we talked about like the labeling and marketing. It can be tricky to navigate. So I tested a lot of different products. And one thing talking to like friends and my customers is that people were like, I really want products that like are meant to work together. I also at this point in my life, like really want the convenience of a one-stop shop. Like I don't want to have to get this from here and that from there. And I get that. I mean, we all love Amazon for that reason, right? So I'm like, yes, I totally get that convenience too. Around that time, I was actually introduced to this company, Shackley, which I had never heard of. The company's been around for almost 70 years. It's kind of like the coolest brand that I had never heard of. Maybe you have never heard of it either. And I was like, how have I never heard about this company before? And I'm glad I was open to learning because I was very skeptical and resistant in the first place. I mean, I didn't really want to change my like skincare products. I also didn't really know that I still wanted to work in that space, to be honest. So I was resistant. It took me some time, but I did decide to just learn a little bit more. And when I did learn, what I did learn, I was really blown away by. The standards that the company has in terms of like ingredient screening and safety are pretty parallel to Beauty Counter. They have over 2,500 ingredients on their Never list. They're beyond organic. So they source organic ingredients, but then do that raw materials like testing and screening on their ingredients before they formulate the products, and then do the finished product testing for over 350 contaminants. Because there's a lot of issues with things like heavy metals, both in supplements and in personal care products that can find their way into products because of the ingredients, like things that are coming from the earth can be really high in heavy metals. So things like that. So they just checked all the boxes for me in terms of the safety. But what really had me interested was their clinical testing and the efficacy of their products. So on the skincare side, they have really amazing clinical results that are beyond what I've seen in the industry. And so I was like, okay, I'm now moving into my like later 40s. And so I'm definitely motivated to have products that actually really work. And I was really blown away once I tried the products. My skin has loved them, and I've had great feedback from my community. So that was exciting. But I think what I'm even more excited about with this company is their wellness and nutrition products. They also have clean home care products too. So it's really a convenient, like clean living marketplace with lots of different types of products that you would use in your home that are safer. A lot of the nutrition and wellness oriented products are held to those same types of standards, which the supplement industry, a lot of people don't know that it is very unregulated as well. So it can be tricky because you can be buying products that say they have, 1,000 milligrams of something on the bottle, but the finished product on the shelf may be degraded and doesn't have that same potency and things like that. It has been really a great partnership and exciting to work with another brand to raise awareness and, really partner with them again on the education and advocacy to help shift these industries, because the lack of regulation, I think, makes it hard as a consumer. And so when you find a company that's doing good work, that's taking it well beyond what's asked of them and trying to model that for other companies, like that's what I want to support. to have more companies doing that type of work.
Well, it's funny because when I saw that you had partnered with them, I was like, oh God, if there's one person that I would trust in partnering with someone like this, having done the due diligence and being so stringent in all of your research, I knew that it was a good company just with your alignment with them because you are so knowledgeable and given your background and given your passion to really help others. So thank you. And we're excited to learn more about that. And your skin, I mean, whatever you're doing, if that's what you're using for your skin, girl, like
I've
it
been
is
using the
working.
Shackley product. I know I was surprised too because I've been taking good care of my skin for a while now, but it really has made a difference. I don't take that trust of my community lightly, and so I do that extra due diligence, and I'm the nerd that likes to dig into the details so that other people don't have to. So I was really impressed, and I'm like, how did I not know about? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you had heard of it before, but like your
No,
parents
never.
and grandparents may have, but they really are this like old school company that's been doing this for a long time, and they really have not done a lot of modern marketing. So they've missed kind of a whole generation of us in terms of reaching us with their products, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Back to hormones. You've been really vocal about some adrenal fatigue that you've had, some hormone imbalances that you've had. You've given us so many nonsensical, no, not, I should say, no nonsense tips for women who are trying to balance other things in their life. But what about balancing our hormones and regaining energy aside from the incredible tips that you've given us before?
Yes, I think, yeah, adrenal imbalances are very common. I think that a lot of it has to do with, there can be a lot of different factors at play, but backing it up, blood sugar balance is a big key piece and foundation. And there is a lot of insulin resistance in our society and in our country. There's varying degrees of that. But let's face it, we're kind of set up to fail when it comes to blood sugar balance and hormone balance. Just the way that the systems are set up. When we look at the food industry, when we look at the pharmaceutical industry that's trying to sell us quick fixes and don't get to the root cause, the blood sugar balance piece is something that so many Americans struggle with. And so I think backing it up to that is a foundational place to focus and to start. And a lot of that has to do with number one, food quality and food ingredients. Looking at your labels, is it really food or is this like a Franken food? Is this made in a lab or is it real food? Just number one, starting there. Number two, I always like to talk with people about focusing on their fat, fiber, and protein. Every time you're eating, are you getting fat, fiber, and protein? Because those are going to be the key things that are going to help with blood sugar balance. And then I also think that overall nutrient balance is a huge piece too, because we have so many deficiencies because our food doesn't have the same nutrient content that it did 100 years ago because of farming practices and things like that. So something as simple as just starting with a really great multivitamin that can help fill in those gaps and cover the bases. Like I said, it doesn't need to be these extravagant supplement protocols. Usually it's just starting with those basics to make sure you're getting the B vitamins that you need. You're getting the more than the recommended daily value of the key nutrients that are essential. And then lastly, I'll also just say boundaries. Like when it comes with adrenal balance, I mean, that's our stress hormones. And so much of it is also lifestyle related. And so I just think for women, especially, we need to get, we need to firm up our boundaries and we need to say no. We need to realize that it's okay to just be and not feel like we need to be doing all the time. We can be human beings. And that's like a bigger, whole separate conversation. But I think on the lifestyle piece, that's a big one. That's just like protecting ourself and our health.
Yeah, that's awesome, and thank you. Speaking of boundaries, I've found that as I age, I've never been great with boundaries. I have none. Um,
Mhm.
I'm sort of what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
I've found as I age, however, I have literally zero boundaries and zero fucks, or I should
Mhm.
say, I have a lot of boundaries and zero fucks. I found
Mhm.
myself at a school event about a year ago, and of course, I'd had too much to drink. And there were a group of women standing in the corner. And I have never found these women to be particularly overly friendly. Individually, they're all very nice, but as they connected as a group, they were not ones that I would want to, I think, interact with. And so I marched right up to
Yeah.
them, Andy, and I said, I just have to tell you guys are such bitches.
I love that.
I said, individually, you're all so nice. I'm like, but listen, I moved into the community not too long ago. I'm like, I'm a really pretty nice person. I'm not like super intimidating. Don't have a six pack. Don't have to be intimidated by like, my bod because,
Oh,
it's
you're like the most
not.
like friendly, approachable, like easy to connect with person.
Yeah.
So
I proceeded to tell them, I'm like, I'm not interested in sleeping with your husbands. I don't even really want to sleep with mine half the time. So, like, it was
you don't
so
have to
funny.
worry
And
about
yeah, I'm sure alcohol totally infused that realness of life. But I laugh when you're like, my fucks have gone out the window and setting boundaries is like somewhat questionable. So I had to share that story.
Yeah. Yeah, it does kind of get easier as we get older. And I do think even we're at that stage in our lives where maybe you said you were going to show up to some event or some party and then you're just like really not feeling it and you just want to get in bed at like
Yeah.
8 o'clock and it's totally okay to be like, you know what? I'm like going to go to bed at 8 and everyone's like, cool, like that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So I think we shift out of that like people pleasing mode and a little bit more into our like self nourishing mode
Yeah.
and that's okay.
But we're
I
owning
think
it, right?
mhm.
I have to say, for anyone who's listening out there, it was an amazing tactic to establish, break the ice, number one. And two, I have to say, in fairness to them, I don't know that they knew that they were totally doing it. And it completely shifted sort of the dynamics of our relationship. They were like, maybe this chick is like, what you see is what you get. And maybe we were bitches.
Mhm.
So, anyway, next time, for all you
Yeah.
moms, this mom stuff is tough, and you've got these different mom crews and so many opinions and all of that. So maybe note to self, walk up to people and just ask them why they're such bitches. It might change things.
A little shock value and it just breaks down the walls.
Totally, totally. Oh my gosh, Andy. Well, I'm so respectful of your time. I feel like we could talk to you for hours. I do have two more pressing questions,
Okay.
especially with your nutrition background and one that's so mindful of, what we're putting into our bodies. I have been very vocal about my experience with Ozempic and unapologetic for leaning into Ozempic or semaglutide. One, because I'm super vain. Two, because I hate exercising. And three, because I love drinking. Like many of us, I had that extra sort of 15 pesky pounds during COVID and nothing was really working. So I felt defeated and my vanity got the best of me. And I've been on Ozempic now for about 9 months. I've lost 15 pounds. I would say it's a very, very slippery slope because when you try to get off of it, you gain all the weight back and it becomes almost very much like an addiction. Now I know a lot of people are sort of microdosing their Ozempic, if you will. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts, and please be very honest, about Ozempic and about weight loss and what's happening in our society with that?
Yeah, I think that it's a nuanced kind of conversation. And number one, I'm glad that it's an option. And I do think there's been a lot of positives that people have experienced with it and people are seeing success. And even some of the like breakthroughs in terms of like your relationship with food and how like relationship with diet culture and all of that. I think there's a lot of really empowering things that are happening for people. And I do think probably just like a lot of like pharmaceutical interventions, it probably can be overprescribed and it probably can be um recommended like ubiquitously, where it might not always be the best fit for some individuals, but I think it's a nuanced conversation. But I do think that it is a great way to see some faster results. And I think the piece that like you touched on where I really like to support people is how do you then maintain that? Because some of the challenges that I've heard that some people have when they're using Ozempic or other like GLP-1 agonists is like maybe loss of appetite, not eating enough, and maybe they're not getting all of the nutrients that they need. And then also muscle wasting. So if you're losing weight and you're not eating enough, then are you losing that lean body mass that we know is so important as we age for our, physical health, our bone density, like just not falling and hurting ourselves, like practical things, but also keeping our metabolism going. And so I think it's important to just like pair it with some of those lifestyle things to help build lean muscle mass, getting enough protein and those amino acids, and leucine is a really big one for building lean muscle mass and keeping that going and making sure you're getting like all the basic nutrients that you need with good multivitamin and just some basics around eating a good balanced diet. Paired with that is probably like the magic solution for that like short-term success and long-term success, because I do think that's like the overall goal is to help people get that weight off. And there's so many benefits to it as well, because insulin resistance, I mean, a lot of times we just think of like weight because that's the thing that bothers us the most. But when it comes to our neurological health, our cardiovascular health, like so many things, insulin resistance is affecting. And so I do think that those long-term benefits are really important as well as the short-term benefits of the weight loss. So I think it's a nuanced conversation where I think it can be very individual, and just I'm really passionate about helping support people to make those changes that will help them just continue to keep it off and have all of the positive side effects. Like I always talk about these changes as like a lot of times with pharmaceuticals, you might have some of the negative side effects like feeling nauseous or whatever it might be, increased risks of different health things. But when we make these lifestyle changes, like there are side effects too, but they're all good. You sleep better, you have better mood, like whatever it is, like they're all upward spiral types of side effects.
Yeah.
So I think it's like they can work together.
Yeah, no, that's great. And thank you for being so open-minded and helping with the sustainability of that program, because that's been the biggest challenge, I think, for the industry is there's just not oversight of people who are on it to, one, really maximize the effects of it, and two, to make this lifestyle changes and sustainability as you go along. Well, more on that later.
Yeah, I know we could have 10 conversations here and all these different topics. I could talk to you all day.
That's sort of the beauty of this, right? Is at Hot Flash Health, and especially with this podcast, we just really want to create a comfortable, vulnerable, open environment like you would be talking to girlfriends sitting around. Because let's talk about it. I mean,
Mhm.
when we get together with girlfriends for wine these days, it's like talking about our colonoscopies, the weather, aging parents, and Ozempic, and our hormones. Like,
Yeah.
you'd sort of
Yep.
sum it up like that.
I think I really have to commend you for being so open and vulnerable and honest and sharing your experience with Ozempic, but just with everything, because it makes other people more free to talk about those things too. And it's so important that we do talk about that. And I think a lot of these changes that we're talking about are things that we need to talk to our friends about. We need to talk to our family about. And when we make a choice for ourselves and we learn from it and we share that information with other people, that is how we start to make these changes and help impact other people. And so I feel like it's kind of a revolution just being able to have these conversations, like women telling women is how things have changed for eons, like women working together and sharing what we're learning, successes we've had. I think that's how we really see change happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably why you and I were so connected to one another when we first met. Okay, so one last question, and then we need to tell everyone how to get more Andie Jones in their life, because I know I certainly need more Andie Jones. Tell us some of your favorite products, tips, tricks, and all of the due diligence and all the research that you've done. Give us like your 5 or 10 Andie Jones Black Book secrets or products.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's going to be tough. Lately, I have been changing over a lot of things that I have used other like safer options of to Shackley products, and I have to say, like, just a few favorites. I'm loving their youth skincare line. Love it. I love their mascara. Love their BB cream. And then I'm loving their like protein powders and collagen. Those have been really big key things that I've noticed a difference in my energy levels. Um, I What are the other things that I'm loving lately? So I'm just starting to play with creatine as a new like addition in helping like boost muscle mass and lean body mass, the Kion brand creatine. So jury's out, like I'm still in the testing mode of that. I use a lot like for electrolytes. I like to alternate, but I use the LMNT or element electrolytes as kind of my go-to. And that's made a huge difference for me as well. I feel like I actually was working with a doctor who was like, your body is so dehydrated. And he's like, do you drink a lot of water? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, are you peeing like all day? I'm like, yes, I pee like 85 times a day. So he's like, your body's not absorbing that moisture. And so the electrolytes have been huge for me with that. I'm trying to think of what else are favorites right now. I don't know. That's all I can think of right now.
We'll have you back on the podcast. Don't you worry.
Okay. I'll have to
For
prep some other favorites. I have so many.
Yeah. For those of us who want more Andie Jones in our life, I know I certainly do. You're always such a pleasure to learn from and be inspired by. How can people find you and how can we support your journey and how can we learn more? I know your Instagram itself is like a constant education feed for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I do share a fair amount on social media. So I'm on Instagram at Andie Jones. It's Andie Jones. And you can find me on Facebook as well. And also in my Instagram bio, you can sign up for my newsletter there. So I do a weekly-ish roundup of my favorites that I send out, just, information, inspirational things, products that I'm loving, and those kinds of things. So that's a great way to stay in touch with me. And I'm kind of in a little bit of a iteration of kind of a gestation period on some other new exciting like projects and things that may be coming that I'm excited to share about. So that's a great way to just stay in the loop for new things that I'm going to be working on as well.
My gosh, well, we can't wait. We know that anything that you align yourselves with or touch is certainly the right thing and one that you've set out to help other women. So thank you, Miss Andie Jones. That is a
Thank
wrap
you.
on today's episode. Remember, menopause may be a wild ride, but together we've got this. Don't forget to follow Hot Flash Health on Instagram and Facebook at Hot Flash Health. Stream and subscribe to our podcasts on YouTube and Spotify. And of course, share your thoughts with us anytime. We love hearing from our fabulous listeners. We love recommendations of any guests that we might have. Until next time, stay sassy, stay fabulous, and keep those hot flashes in check.